Today we're going to discuss lunges, the different variations and the benefits of them. So with lunges, some of the benefits are certainly some increased strength, balance and coordination. This primarily works the legs, the glutes, and the core. So some of the standard lunge variations that we know would be like walking, so that's simply going through. You can do a forward lunge where you're in place, stepping forward, pushing back to where you started, or simply doing the opposite, stepping back, and then stepping back forward to where you started. And we almost forgot about side lunges. So we just want to go out to the side. So whether directly out to the side or more like a 45, you can work on different angles so that we're going wider than hip width. So coming out to the side, and again, you can work on coming all the way down. So a little different with the side lunges. We're typically not going to get the knee right to the floor, but we're going as low as we can with the hips, and we can sit back. And you can certainly do that on both sides. So working the angles, it's a different way to work the outside of the hips and the glutes, and working those angles just to see how that's going to feel, strengthening those different areas. Some of the things that we want to consider while we're working through our lunges are we're trying to keep our feet about hip width apart. It's going to help with our balance. So we're trying to avoid walking on the tightrope. So if we're here and then we're kind of wobbling, just think we need to keep our feet about hip width apart. Like your feet are on train tracks, just not quite as wide. So we can step forward. That way we have much more balance as we're going through, nice and stable. So we want to stay vertically aligned. So thinking about our shoulders over our hips, ultimately over that knee at the bottom. So we want to be in an upright position. We don't want to be leaning forward. We don't want to be pushing off of our legs. And to do that, we want to make sure that we're not just arching. We need to keep that core engaged. So next thing that we're looking at is that we want to try and go through that full range of motion. So that means getting all the way down with control, and that should see our knee contacting the floor. So that trailing knee coming right down to the floor, and then as we step through, we're going to see that full extension, the leg and the hip as we move through to the next step. We want to try to make sure that we're not swaying or swinging. So we don't want to try to be too wobbly, especially as we look at some weighted variations. We don't want to swing the weights, and we don't want to be caught leaning, because then we're going to be off balance and we don't want to be straining anything. So try to be balanced, try to be engaged with the core, and make sure that we're moving efficiently. Lastly, we're looking at some large steps. So not like super too big. We're not trying to do like the standing splits unless you're looking to consciously work on your stretching. Otherwise, we're looking at a big enough step so that that forward knee is over the ankle of that forward foot, and the trailing one straight down from under the hips, the shoulders, hips, and the knee down to the floor. So think about 90 degrees at all those positions. You don't want to be stepping too short where that knee is coming further forward, lifting that toe up. It's going to put a lot more of your weight into the front part of the foot, and it's going to work a lot more. If you're feeling a lot more in the quads, you're probably taking a short step. If you're feeling in the glutes, that's good, but you'll also want to feel the quads, because if we have that even weight distribution in our feet, and as we come up, we're using the whole leg, even pressure, and the forefoot, so the ball of your foot kind of near the toes, or as well as your heel. So you're using that backside, the calves, hamstring, and the glutes. So that's why a lot of times you'll feel it in the glutes, but it's not just the glutes, it's also the quads. It's just you may not have worked the glutes quite a bit. It's usually working on lunges are that big reminder on engaging those glutes, and you really feel it, and the butt's kind of sore for a little while, but in a good way, feeling like you've worked it. So looking at some other options, we can have some weight. So you can hang on to one weight and work on it, and that's a key one. We don't want that weight to have us lean as we're stepping out. Everything stays the same that we were discussing. And you can certainly work on switching sides as needed. There's different options, whether it's with the dumbbells. We can go into like a front rack or supported on the shoulders. You can even go overhead, and there's different items that we can hang on to, whether it's a kettlebell, hanging onto that front rack position, or overhead. The overhead one tends to be quite challenging because it's a lot more for the core as well as the upper body to hold that up. Other options would be a barbell. So in the front rack position, where we can step out, whether we're doing our forward lunge, reverse lunge, we could do it from the back, same thing. So this is where most people are most comfortable for loading up a lot of weight to work through, but we still need to keep everything aligned vertically so that we don't end up kind of pushing forward or leaning so that we lose that balance. Other option would be overhead. So again, the most challenging, more so when it's two weights, separate weights, like the dumbbells overhead. And then you can work on, hang on to some unconventional things. Something like a sandbag, a duffel bag. If you have some of the big heavy objects, like a D-ball or a slam ball, you can even get the super big ones. You can just work on simply a hug. It's a little bit different. If it's bigger and it's hanging out down low, you might have to worry about keeping it above the hips so it's not in the way, becoming a hindrance. So many different ways to work on challenging that lunge by loading it. One of the things that we can look at is increasing that range of motion. So if we have a step or like some plates, we can stack up and work on having that deeper lunge. So as we step on and still work to go to the floor, so not just hovering, we want to get all the way down. So this is going to force our hips to have to go lower, and we're going to deepen that hip flexion and then coming up. So you can still work on the same side for a few reps or alternating and get both sides in. So that's a good way that we can work on improving our range of motion, and just some things to help either warm up and stretch out to help us really get the most out of our lunges. We can work on some different areas. So a deep, low lunge is definitely going to help things out. So this is where you can almost go into the splits, getting down nice and low. You may hear some different terms for the big lunge or like a gecko stretch. Really trying to get nice and low, really pushing those hips around. And feel free to explore, find those angles that are going to help you stretch out. Push the knee out gently to really stretch things out on the outside of the hip. And again, move around, wiggle around. Sometimes you can slide back, get a bit more stretching in the hamstring. Working through to get things nice and loosened up. So on both sides, and also working on the inside as you push out on the knee. So other options are working on the calf. So lots of different ways. Everybody's used to stretching out the calf. Many ways you can prop the toe up. That's a good one that I like to really stretch out the upper calf, driving those hips forward with the leg straight. You can simply do a downward dog as an option. Pushing those heels down, chest through. A lot of different ways finding what works for you to stretch out the calves. Working on hip 90-90s, or getting your hips at 90 degrees. So also similar to some pigeon stretch variations for those that are familiar with yoga. So if we look at having our legs in a 90-degree position, so coming in front, the knees are at 90 degrees, pull those toes up so that the ankle's at 90 degrees as well, and then the back leg, that needs to be at 90 degrees as well. So we're looking at 90 degrees, so essentially your back shin would be in line with your foot, and we want that back knee down, because that's key. We want to get as upright as we can, and then hinging forward. And feel free to kind of explore those different ranges, find out where you're going to get that stretch. It's going to work out the outside of the hip, also maybe some areas of the low back, depending on how tight we are and how things are connected. And we want to try to stay upright and even turn a little bit, almost like you want to look at the wall behind you, but keep that back knee down. That's really going to help with that hip internal rotation. So that's going to be great. Working on it, you want to spend some time, at least 30 seconds, if not more than a minute, long enough that you're going to feel the benefit in the stretch. And then you switch it up and do the exact same thing, working through on the other side. After that, another option is working on some quad stretches. Many people are used to stretching out the quads. There's a lot of different ways to do it. Simply just working on pulling the heel towards your butt is okay, but when you're doing that, really work on pushing those hips forward. So some people just like doing it while lying. Those that have been doing a lot of CrossFit and stuff, they may have heard of something like the couch stretch. So that's a great aggressive kind of quad stretch in the hip flexors. And this is where we are trying to focus on getting that leg nice and flat. Usually on the wall, it's called the couch stretch. You can do this on the couch. Main thing is getting that knee right down to that corner of your shin, right up against it. Get the other leg out in front, so now you're kind of in that lunge position. And the key here is really trying to engage the glutes on the quad side that you're stretching and push those hips forward and down and get that big stretch. You're gonna feel it pretty intense for those that haven't done this before, and staying down with that hand on the floor for that support is probably gonna be plenty for those that haven't really done this before. In time, you can get a little more upright. You don't just arch, engage the core, and keep focusing on driving the hips forward. And if you can even use the PPC or stretching things out and reaching over. Again, don't stop focusing on driving those hips forward. Another modification to that that might be a little more manageable is, again, working from that lunge position. Reach back and grab the opposite foot, and then you can pull that heel to your butt. And then again, you can kind of shift around, explore, find some different positions. That is going to help stretch out the quad, really the hip flexors on the side of the heel to your butt. So some good big stretches. And lastly, some hamstring stretches are really good. Gonna help out with that posterior chain being engaged. So lots of different ways you can go for kind of that straddle position, hinging down the middle, down to each side. You could use certainly some bands, or even without the bands, you can do something called like some flossing. So that just means that we're going to apply some pressure, bringing that leg or the knee towards the chest, with gentle pressure, and then you're gonna work on straightening the leg. And then just flex the knee, and then straighten. So you can add a little bit as you straighten. Think about pulling your toes down towards your face. That gets pretty intense. It'll get some stretch right up into the calves. So some good options. Another simple way, just a forward fold. You're gonna fold in half and hang out there. You can do that just for hanging out for a minute or two. Just focus on your breathing, shift the weight around. Otherwise, you can go with that straight leg, toe up, kind of the standing version, almost like the hamstring flossing. You can do that, or work on going to the floor. So a lot of different options that can really help you to loosen some things up. It's good to mix it up, to try some different things, see what's gonna help benefit you the most and get you nice and loosened up. And just remember, it's all helping us to work on that great lunge, about 90 degrees, staying upright, keep that core engaged, and keep stepping. Thanks for tuning in.